the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, here for a little Patreon only. Oh yeah, Wednesday Q&A. And this is going to be a Q&A. I don't know. Well, no, I've had guests on before for a Q&A. I've had Stephanie on, and I'm being joined once again by the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Every time you say Patreon, it sounds like patriarchy.
Wow. We cannot have that.
No.
Especially with our other guest here, who just will not stand for that whatsoever.
She's going to smash that shit.
That would, of course, be the inimitable MK Lords.
I'm going to peg the patriarchy, y'all.
Oh, shit.
Oh, I have to steal that.
Peg the patriarchy.
It's not stealing. It's just sharing the mind fruit. Pass, puff, pass that around. It's just...
My thoughts are your thoughts. They belong to no one.
Okay. All right. We'll do Vulcan mind meld later. There we go. Nice. So, MK, of course, you were on last week. I released a special with a very controversial name that, well, actually, you know what? To people's credit, a lot of people liked it because I thought that was a pretty wild episode. But what it was feminism. I'm trying to remember how it went. Feminism is socialism with a strap on. Is that it, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
You're not sorry.
No.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, so this is great, you know, and of course MK is actually in studio. All three of us are here. This is fantastic. You know, I have to say, there's a lot of people, including people that are my patrons, that like literally when they open up their accounts, the first three people they follow are the people sitting in this room right now.
Wow. I feel like we shouldn't have that kind of power. I don't know. That's a little bit dangerous.
Hey. Yeah, well, it is what it is. So, and of course, MK, you have your own little podcast. Well, I shouldn't say little. I think it's great.
It's a big old podcast.
It's a big old podcast. I mean, that thing will... Yeah. That's right. But Iconosass, right?
Yes.
And how do you spell that?
It's ICONOSASS.
Okay.
So
like icon o sass.
I love it.
Yeah.
And what would you say the show is about? Just to give you the plug here.
So it's about a bunch of weird shit. So basically, whatever weird stuff I come across, it's kind of loosely structured right now. I've had a couple guests on. I've had Stephanie on. I've also had Angela Keaton on, and then I'm working on a solo episode right now. So yeah, I mean, I kind of cover weird articles. Like I did one about Nazi furries. I kind of like, you know, it's kind of funny. It's meant to just be kind of humorous and weird and kind of lighthearted. Sometimes I talk about feminism. Sometimes I do a little bit of serious discussions, and then I usually end it. The only regular segment I have now is Sassy Bun of the episode, which is Sassy Bun is a really sassy, strong person in history that did some unique things and is known for kind of being like iconoclastic.
Yeah, sure. That's my favorite segment. It's tough to pick one, but I do enjoy that. Of course, that term "sassy bun" was created by the other person in this in the studio.
That's right.
You can't see it right now, but I'm twitching my nose like a sassy bun.
Yes.
Yeah, so, well, that's cool. I'll put a link in the show notes for that. There is like a podcast feed for it, right? I think I had somebody ask me about that.
Yeah, it's on SoundCloud.
It's on SoundCloud, and you can find it there.
Yeah, you can find it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But anyway, we do have questions to get into. I mean, we could just bullshit, you know, all night long, I'm sure.
I was going to say, like, if we're bullshitting a little bit, I think we can do that because it's a Patreon show.
Yep.
I was going to say, isn't it easier to do a podcast when you're actually like in studio with a person and you can make eye contact and make faces at each other than over Skype or some shit like that? It just doesn't work as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. We did an episode together when you were in Florida, and that was way easier than the one I had to do remotely with Angela because it was kind of hard to see the other person's reactions and you know, there's a little bit of latency and stuff like that, so it does make it a lot easier. So I'm super happy to be like in real life with y'all. So
yeah,
absolutely, I love it. I mean, hell, well, you know, total honesty, I wish this could be going on every week. I mean, I would love it. This would be perfect.
I'd love to do this on a regular basis.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, are you gals up for some questions? We got a couple good ones here.
We should explain. You asked us to be on the show because you were kind of saving some of your Q&A questions.
You see, but I think that ruins it because, like, I think a lot of guys are probably thinking it's like, yeah, they came in, they took over, they smashed the patriarchy, and like they forced Brian, they tied him to the chair.
Never mind, we're going to change the narrative.
And they said, "Damn it, we're taking over your show."
That's what we did. We were wearing pants, and we had clubs. And
I'm not wearing pants. I'm wearing a dress.
I like this number, actually. It's like, yeah, exactly. We are going to talk about nudism, ironically, coming up, but
in their minds, I mean, if they're going to believe the narrative that we stormed the studio and tied you to a chair, we're going to be definitely wearing some kind of like leather suits or something, and like carrying various weapons. And also, I think there should be like full body stockings in there too. Like, I don't know, like that. We just looked at the pictures of the Antifa girl that got punched, that released, like, she got like, I don't know, revenge porned, and then she released her own sexy boudoir photos. And I was saying, like,
it's like that.
Oh, she's hot. Yeah. It was really hot. Somebody saw them and commented like, "Okay, I think I've turned communist." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm becoming a little red myself. It's not just blushing." But anyway, like, I feel like we should kind of be dressed like her in this imaginary fantasy where we storm the studio.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I'm sorry, I did interrupt you to try and just like up the game on this little episode, but you were going to say that I asked you two to be on, which I did.
Yes, because you were saving some questions for us.
Yeah, I had set some
Q&A questions
aside. Absolutely, that I think.
I'm pretty sure the questions rolled in over the last couple of weeks, but you did sort of say like, "Oh, wouldn't this be great for MK coming to town and being in the studio if you guys could do this together?" So, or you ladies, you girls, you people, whatever.
What do you mean, you people? No, sorry.
We had this question about pronouns once, and like, what do you call a group of people? MK would call it y'all, right? Like from this, because you're from the South.
I'd say y'all, and I think y'all is such a good gender neutral way to address a group of people. And yes, it does kind of give away that you're from the South, but I feel that anyone can use it. And one of the less shitty things that's come out of the South, I gotta say, like, as far as like gender neutral pronouns, if you're not certain how to address a group of people, and I think it's kind of warm and inviting too. But I also say you guys, but I know some people have an issue with the term guys.
Mm-hmm. So,
I think y'all is just more, it's gender neutral, it's welcoming.
Yeah, I think we talked. Was that on Sex and Science Hour?
Yeah,
we talked about that. Yeah, and that was how I felt about it too. Like I was like, this is one of the things the South really got right. Like it was like, wow, like y'all is just, it's perfect. And I said the same thing, like that. You guys, like I think that's one that people should just kind of let in. It's like, all right, let's let this one slide. But I get it. I understand why some people have issue. So
we're not going to just let the guys in and let it slide.
Hey. Far be it for me to, make those kind of suggestions. I don't want any control over that stuff anyway. So, all right. So are we ready for some questions, or did anybody have more?
No, let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's just jump right in.
Let's jump right in. Okay. How far are we in? Yeah, we've only been doing this for 10 minutes, so we're fine. This is generally
that's a decent warm up.
It's a good warm up. Everybody's feeling good. Okay.
Good.
All right.
Feel good.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's do this then. So, first one. Let's start off with the dating question. Then we'll go into the nudism. How about that? So we've got, good morning, Master Sovereign. So this was, it was targeted at me. All right, I won't read the whole thing.
Who calls you master?
There's a.
Do you have slaves? Do you have subs out there that I don't know about or something?
Look,
nothing wrong with that.
No, just I would like to know about it. I mean, geez.
I mean, if it's any help, the same person calls you, Mistress Stephanie.
Ooh.
Oh, well, they sound kind of submissive. Yeah. All right, well, they can call me Mistress Stephanie.
Yeah.
I got a little bit of a dominant streak. Yeah.
You guys have some cool listeners.
Oh, we do.
They are awesome. They are awesome. This one in particular is pretty cool. So anyway, I'll just read the whole question as it is, because it was more directed at me. But since you fine ladies here. I figured, what the hell? So, all right, from one dude in his mid-30s to another, which I'll give my mid-30s take. What's your opinion on age differences in dating? And it is just this short of a question.
Oh, that's vague.
Yeah.
And there could be a lot of... yeah.
Yeah, but I think,
see the face that MK is making.
I wish we had video. But, I'll pare it down at points. So, but I think there's a good start off with it being kind of in a vague range. So yeah, with differences, age differences in dating, so, all right, if I said to you, what do you think about a guy who's, all right, he's starting off in the mid-30s. What if it's a guy who's like, say, 35 and they're going out with an 18-year-old? What do you say?
I think before we go into specific examples,
sure.
I would like to talk about the general philosophy of it,
okay.
I guess.
I figure we could, but okay, yeah.
So the problem with dating somebody or having a relationship with somebody or just having sex with somebody, any kind of intimate relationship where there's an age difference, is the potential for there to be a power imbalance where one person has a lot more power than the other one does.
Right.
And they could abuse that power potentially to traumatize the other person, to take advantage of them somehow, to hurt them, or to, or just, it doesn't even have to be a conscious thing. It would just sort of happen by virtue of the fact that the one person has so much more power than the other one.
And this power would develop, would you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, this power would develop, it's not necessarily a physical like power over a person.
It's not necessarily physical power. It's sometimes it comes from life experience.
Yes,
it's basically just life experience because like it or not, like there are many young people who are precocious, meaning that they're kind of, I guess, a little bit wise beyond their years. They're smart for their age.
Sure.
They're sharp, clever, intelligent, creative. They've got a lot of talent. And so, yeah, you can have all those things when you're young. But the one thing that you can only have with age is life experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes life experience adds up to a lot more power than all those other things, talent and intelligence and precociousness and all that. So I think that's like the biggest problem. It's also, obviously, if you're talking about power imbalances in relationships, there's always going to be at least little ones and potentially maybe medium-sized ones or big ones, because it's influenced by other things. For example, if you have a boss who's dating their employee, that's a power imbalance because the employee could be fired by the boss if the relationship goes bad, or they might be afraid to report, some misconduct, or they might get inside information from so.
That's like a direct byproduct of hierarchy, though, right?
Yeah, so that the hierarchy in that case is kind of creeping into the personal relationship. The platonic work hierarchy is creeping into the personal relationship. Then there's the idea of, power imbalances based on other social factors like race, class, and gender, right? If you're dating someone who has a lot more money than you, that could be a power imbalance as well. We see that all the time in sugar daddy and sugar mama relationships, where there's often an age difference and a money or class difference, or a difference of means, I guess you could say. I don't know if class is the right word, but there is a different. Money is power. Everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows money equals power. And so if you date someone who has a lot more wealth than you do, that can afford them the ability to do certain things that maybe you don't have the ability to do. And maybe you want them to. Maybe you want to be able to use their resources to accomplish things. And so you stay with them longer than you would have, or you date them at all when you wouldn't have otherwise if they didn't have all that money, right? So those are some examples of power imbalances in relationships. And some people are okay with power imbalances in relationship, and obviously it's a degree, right? It's not like one person has power and the other one doesn't. There's always degrees, right? So there might be a small power imbalance in a relationship between a man and a woman, because in a lot of social situations, men have more power than women do. I know everybody's going to bring out the F word and call me a bitch and for saying that, but hopefully not on your Patreon feed. But like, men have men have power in certain situations where women don't. And so there could be a small imbalance in every heterosexual relationship because of that. But when you start throwing in other power imbalances, maybe it gets too imbalanced to be a functional relationship. And so obviously it's a fine line, right? In some cases it's clear cut, right?
Right.
In some cases it's obvious that this is not likely to be a very functional relationship. But in some cases, it's not so clear cut. And there is no committee that decides whether two people can date each other or more than two people or whatever, right? Oh, there's another example of a power imbalance. Like if you have a triad of there's a very common situation where called unicorn hunting, right? They're looking for unicorns, where it's a heterosexual couple and they're looking for a woman, a single hot bisexual woman who likes both of them equally and is only allowed to have sex with both of them at the same time and wants to join their relationship, their existing relationship. And there is a power imbalance there because couples do have a certain amount of privilege, especially heterosexual couples in society. They can do things that single people can't. They can save money on things. They can do other, they get socially sanctioned, like people like the heterosexual couple as an institution, I guess. They respect them. They get their relationship gets recognized by society as valid and important and normal.
They generally have more resources and
resources. Yeah, they may have more resources. And the single woman, may not have as many. It definitely doesn't have that privilege of being seen as stable and in a monogamous committed relationship and recognized as valid by society, especially if she joins their relationship and they become a triad. And she also has all these conditions that are put on her usually. That's why they're called unicorns, because nobody wants to put up with that shit. There's not that many single hot bisexual women out there that want to join an existing couple, but only if they conform to all these rules and regulations, like you have to like both of them equally or something, and you have to spend equal time with both of us, and you can't like encroach on our existing relationship, but you're going to join it on our terms. I mean, so that's why unicorns are called unicorns, because it's rare that you'll find that kind of arrangement.
They usually don't exist.
They don't exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that could be another example of a power imbalance in a relationship. And like I was saying before, there is no committee that decides whether people can date each other. So obviously these are questions you have to kind of work out for yourself. And that comes with life experience too. Figuring out how much of a power imbalance you're willing to roll with in a relationship, right? And maybe a person is great, so they're kind of worth it. But when you're the older party or the party that has more power, I think you're extra responsible for trying to make sure there's enough egalitarianism in the relationship to make it functional and healthy for the other person. You sort of have almost, I would not like a duty or obligation, but it's the decent human being thing to do if you care about this other person, to not want to expose them to a major power imbalance that might traumatize or damage them or fuck with their life in a bad way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a pretty common thing for most heterosexual men who are, up to middle age and older to want to date women between the ages of 17 and 25.
Yeah.
I mean, who does honestly. So as far as I agree with everything Stephanie
I saw a
said.
thing that said it was a poll or something that it was like a study on men and who they look at on dating websites. And no matter what age the man was, they always looked at 22-year-old women as the most attractive.
Right. Yeah. So and I mean,
whereas women tended to look at men that were closer to their own age.
Right.
As more attractive. Yeah. Sorry, I will shut up now.
So you have to be conscious of these power imbalances, and with age comes responsibility. And So to kind of go off of your example, is it okay for a 35-year-old man to date an 18-year-old woman? I mean, again, like, I don't make the rules, you know, should there be a law against it? I don't think so. But I think you should be doing some serious self-reflection if you have the same emotional maturity as a 35-year-old man as an 18-year-old woman does. And yeah, there is no substitute for experience. She's not going to be as experienced as you, as intelligent as she is. And, you know, maybe she could be more intelligent than you in a lot of ways. But that's just... I think there is some responsibility that goes along with it. I think that's too big of an age gap, and I think that once you get older, that's less of an issue. Like, I think, you know, people above the age of about 25 or so, the age gap difference becomes less important.
Right.
Like, my parents were 12 years apart.
Ooh.
And it would have been weird if my dad was dating my mom, like, when she was an 18-year-old woman, but they didn't meet until her late 20s.
Ah, okay.
So it was.
And so then he was 40, and
yeah, so he was in his 40s, and I think that was a more kind of equitable power dynamic.
Sure.
Basically, and that makes sense. And I mean, my ex-husband was a little bit older than me, but I do think we were at the same maturity level. But he was only there was only a 4-year difference,
right.
Even though we met when we were both really young. But yeah, I think you should really be doing some kind of reflection on that. And, you know, just because the law says someone's, you know, ready at, you know, to date anyone at 18, I think you really need to be thinking a little bit more about it. And
just because you can doesn't mean you should, which is a very common thing that comes up with.
Yeah, exactly. And and yeah, it is creepy. And then, like, below the age of 18, I mean, again, it's hard to. I mean, I do tend to kind of generalize with age. I think that's totally fine. Like, I'm also not, you know, I don't know if all laws should be abolished in that regard, you know. Like, I think you can generally say that, you know, 18 is probably a good age, or maybe 16 to 18 is probably a good age that people are becoming self-aware enough, you know, to be able to experiment. But yeah, with people who are much older than them, it's kind of creepy. Honestly, it's weird.
Now, if it's two 18-year-olds.
If the age differences are much closer, then yeah, that's less of an issue. I mean, yeah, I can imagine there are a lot of maybe, you know, 17-year-olds who are just as experienced as maybe some people in their early 20s. Mm-hmm. But yeah, above that, when you get into the 30s, I think that
going below 20 is a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't cross that line either.
Yeah, I wouldn't cross that line.
I feel like
I don't have anything in common with someone.
I was about to say exactly that.
Like, and that's kind of another issue you have with such a big gap in age is at a certain point, you know, you're not going to get certain cultural references. You're not going to have that much in common with someone. Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't want to date someone 10 years my junior. I'm like 27, and I can't even imagine being around a group of 17 to 20-year-olds for any extended period of time and, like,
not
enjoying
keep your hair.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what would we talk about? Like, and I have so much, you know, so much of a, you know, jump ahead in life experiences, and, like, I just don't think I would have very much in common with them. So yeah, I mean, when we're going to get to specific ages, I mean, that's, I guess, the kind of answer. But yeah, it comes down to life experience and being aware of power dynamics and you being conscious of that. I mean, yeah, of course, I'm sure that desire is there. Like, yeah, dudes are gonna want a fucking 18-year-old girl. Like, that's, you know, a common thing to want to do. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you necessarily should. And again, like, at some point you just know, like, at some point as a 35-year-old dude, how, like, I'm just having a hard time, again, me, like, being closer to that age, barely having anything in common with someone that age, like, or even like if I wanted to date like a boy that age or something too, I just like can't even imagine what we would talk. It has a certain point we have to have something in common, and there has to be some kind of like intellectual connection there, and
for it to last.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, like, I don't know.
No.
It's something that gives me a cringy kind of feeling.
Yeah. I would say when you're in your 30s, when you're in your early 30s, I don't know. Or blanket rule. In your 30s, do not go below 20. I'm just gonna say that.
I think that's fair. Yeah, and I think that's fair enough. User discretion and also
like if the younger person wants a relationship, that happens, right? Those relationships happen. Younger people can get totally enamored with older people and they can get really hot for them. Mm-hmm. I know, I've been there, okay? I was that 16 and 17-year-old who thought I was smart and I had it all figured out.
Oh, same here.
And every fucking 16 and 17 and 18-year-old girl thinks that. They think they are the one exception that is so smart and so mature for their age. But nothing replaces life experience. Nothing.
Well, so yeah, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. Absolutely. I would add on too, because I think some people would caveat with something along the lines of, what if somebody has a ton of experience, in their early life? I mean, like myself, I had a ton of experience. I mean, actually, when I was 18, I was dating a woman that was 34. And I mean, she wasn't the only woman I was dating either. But the thing is, you can have that experience, but at the same time, you don't have the timeline. You don't have the years on you to where you can accurately gauge whether or not that experience you had was normal, or, or if it's okay. So you still have to have that time. It doesn't matter how much experience gets compacted into a young person's life. You really need that time to be able to assess, I think, what's actually, what happened to you, what's going on.
Yeah, and as the older maturity is such a big thing too. Oof. I mean, you can't really, emotional maturity develops over time, regardless of how much experience you have, with something. And that just takes time. There's no
people's brains.
You can't jump ahead and do that.
Sure.
People's frontal lobes are still myelinating up to age 25, which means basically the part of your brain that makes decisions and assesses risks and does judgments is still forming. And so on
average, right.
Well, yeah.
Or is that across the board?
That's pretty much across the board.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. It's a biological reason.
Basically, what that means is in your late teens and early 20s, a lot of people have this problem where they take risks that they wouldn't take when they get older and have more life experience, but also have a more developed brain that makes those, hopefully, those rational decisions. But yeah, a lot of people do that. And it's just that, you not only are you figuring life out, you're having a lot of experiences for the first time, but also that part of your brain that puts the brakes on and says, whoa, maybe this isn't a good idea, especially when there's alcohol involved, is kind of not completely caught up yet to the rest of your brain. So you may want to do things that you don't realize are very dangerous and risky. And I'm not saying dating an older person is necessarily always dangerous or risky, but basically, I really think as the older person, you have that perspective. You've already been 18 and you know what it was like to think that you were the smartest and most precocious and most mature 18-year-old in the world. And looking back on it from your 30s, you can probably say, well, that may not have been completely true.
Yeah, but that requires a degree of self-awareness that certainly I think a lot of guys don't have.
Maybe they do have it, but their judgment can get clouded by lust or whatever, or by attraction to somebody. That happens. It happens to everybody. I won't say I'm immune from that, right? Haven't you ever been really attracted to someone and a part of your brain is saying, maybe this isn't such a great idea, but then that part of the brain gets ignored and silenced because you're so attracted to that person? I've been there. Sure, everybody has. But as the older person, you are responsible for having been 18 or 17 or 16 or however old your potential partner is, and realizing, looking back on it, that even if they're saying they really want you to, they really want this relationship, there might be some caveats to that only you are really aware of right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I understand what I get it. I think there's a lot of people who've never mentally left high school, and like never. And they are not going to say to themselves, I didn't have it figured out at 18. They're going to say, oh no, I've had this licked, for 15, 20 years. And that's, so I get, you're right. Like, but I sadly, I don't think a lot of people are going to have that wherewithal.
And you know what? I'm not, those relationships, I mean, when it's in the legal area, like, I'm not really going to there's not much I'm going to do about it, right? If I hear about a relationship with an age difference like that, I might kind of cringe. But likely, unless it's someone I know well, I might, maybe talk to the younger partner if I knew them and cared about them. But
yeah, and we're not trying to like infantilize like people who might be, 18 and dating someone older. I mean, that's not really my kind of thinking on it. Saying that they lack experience and possibly emotional maturity it's just factual, really. I mean, and it's, it's something that they eventually learn. And I mean, maybe a lot of these relationships aren't always traumatic or harmful to the younger person, but you do have to just be extremely careful. And I mean, it's just probably better to, get to know that person as a friend and like really wait until they've matured and you've matured too. I mean, if you're wanting to pursue a serious relationship or something, like just take time with it. Like, I mean, if it does seem like something really special and, you're both kind of on the same page or whatever. But yeah, I mean, be aware of the power imbalance. Like it's a little, it's messed up. It can be messed up.
It can be predatory, really for sure.
It can be very predatory.
Because all relationships, whether there's an age difference or not, all relationships have the potential to end in heartbreak, or emotional damage. That kind of thing. When the person breaks up with you, you feel really hurt and sad and rejected, or, potentially physical harm of some kind, like they pass on an STI to you, or you get you knocked up or something like that. So relationships can hurt. Any relationship. It's enough to deal with the potential of a relationship hurting you when you're the same age as the other person. But when there's a large age difference, it can be even magnified because maybe that's the first time they're experiencing love, the younger partner. Maybe that's the first time they feel this way about somebody else, and it could hurt them way more, or maybe, just for various reasons, it could have the power to hurt even more. So I like what Dan Savage says about those kinds of relationships where it's, one partner is a lot younger. Try to observe the campsite rule and leave them better than you found them. Don't leave a messy campsite, right? Don't leave behind a partner who you really hurt and treat like not very well.
Yeah. All right. So
if you're gonna date a younger person, try to keep that in mind.
So you're a cultural Marxist. Got it, right? Okay. That's
why am I a cultural Marxist?
No. I mean, what else do you think, MK? I mean, do you have any other thoughts on it? I do have other questions involved with this that I want to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to put it. Be extremely cautious. And I mean, yeah, again, you're not entitled to date people in the most preferred age range ever. Okay. Find some people your own age. I guarantee you're going to have more in common with them. And you can still date people younger than you that, go back to the example of a 35-year-old dating an 18-year-old. I mean, that just seems like too big of an age gap. And I mean, maybe try to find someone 5 years younger. You're going to have more in common. And, if you're attracted to, I don't know, well, I mean, you could find someone your own age too. There's just as many people you can be attracted to, I think, at, a wide range of ages. But yeah, I think below a certain age, when you're in your 30s, it's just a bit creepy, and most of the time creepy and weird. And but then past that, it's less so. I mean, I've known people with huge age range differences, and it's been fine. But they usually met when they were both fully developed adults, their frontal lobe had developed, and they were able to make, better decisions on how to have better long-term thinking and emotional maturity and experiences.
Okay, so well then let's switch it up. What if it's I don't know, 25-year-old or 30-year-old, and maybe there's a difference there, and if there is, you can call it, going out with a 60-year-old or a 65-year-old. Like, what do you think about that?
I find that a little bit interesting because it's hard for me to imagine being attracted to somebody that, for somebody in their 20s or 30s to be attracted to a 60-year-old.
Okay.
I mean, it does happen for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you said, like you both said, kind of one of the power imbalances out there is money, and a very wealthy 60-year-old, I'm sure, could be very attractive in certain ways. To man or woman, frankly. I mean, it does go both ways. Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think, MK?
I'm much more comfortable with that age range. Because there is going to be more emotional maturity, and I think the issue of power dynamics is a little bit, while still complex, there isn't such a big power disparity,
right?
Because I'm trying to think, like, when I was maybe slightly younger, like I could think of some people in their 60s who I would find attractive.
Okay.
And not because they had a lot of money,
right?
Really, but
Silver Fox, Michael Bolton,
or even like some
I do
women.
Michael Bolton. I admit it.
Yeah, like
wow.
Michael Bolton
all right,
is,
confessions.
No, I'm just kidding. I actually wouldn't, but I loved his Valentine's Day special on Netflix.
Yeah, but no, there are a lot of people. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I mean, there are several.
Mark Cuban.
Oh, no, wait. Michael Bolton's one thing. Mark Cuban is a whole other. Anyway, please continue, MK.
But isn't like Catherine Zeta-Jones like 60?
No, she's pushing it.
She's gorgeous.
Yeah, you're right about that.
I mean, if I could get with her, like...
Yeah. True.
Mask of Zorro.
Kathy Ireland is very attractive.
Well, I don't know. All right, never mind. I'm not going down that road.
Yeah.
Okay,
hypothetically speaking, I could think of people that I would be attracted to, that were that much older. But again, I'm wondering how much we could really have in common and stuff like that, just as far as like getting cultural references and taste in music and pop culture.
The thing you would have in
stuff.
common is that you both want to fuck.
Yeah.
Basically, you're both attracted to... And like sometimes those power imbalances can turn people on. Like some people are really into that stuff. So... Yeah.
And I mean, as long as there's, and everyone's consenting and, that. I do think like mid-20s is you're much more developed in your mid-20s than you are in your late teens, like, obviously.
Yeah, at least when you get into the 20s and 30s, you've got the brain in place. You may not have the money in place, but you got the brain, like fully functioning brain. And I mean, it's your body, it's your life. You can do whatever you want with it. You probably are very aware of what's going on. So yeah, I guess now that you mentioned those examples, MK, I guess I could be a little bit more open to that.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't completely, I guess, write someone off, but it wouldn't be, I guess, my first choice. I prefer to maybe take people a little bit closer to my age.
Sure.
So, or, maybe slightly older or whatever. But yeah. So.
Okay. Well,
on it.
I mean, another question I have for both of you is, let's say, how to put this? No, not like that.
I want to know what that was.
Yeah,
yeah, I do too. I'm curious.
Off microphone, maybe. Okay, so Stephanie, you mentioned earlier, there's the statistic that guys, no matter how old they are, no matter their age, they're always looking at the 22-year-old. Right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm aware of that statistic, and I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just saying that the argument goes from the guys is that, well, that's because that's breeding age. Like that's
biological.
It's a biological imperative.
Eggs.
Eggs. Brains.
Get them eggs.
So I mean, like, there's their argument is there's actually a very good excuse. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that's a thing. I want to hear from both of your responses to that idea.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can empathize with that, right? Because when on a dating website, you're only seeing somebody based on their appearance. Like if you're swiping on Tinder, all you have to go on is a picture. So of course you're going to look at physical indicators of what most people find attractive, which is beauty, which is like health and fertility and youth. So I get it. I get why men are attracted to women in their 20s, no matter what age the man is. But again, are you looking for somebody to breed with? Or are you looking for a relationship? Like, what are your actual goals here, right? Can you look past initial attraction and maybe more towards what you might have in common with that person? And so I think dating websites are a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a skewed indicator. But then again, a lot of people start relationships nowadays on dating websites.
Sure.
So it's relevant to today's world. So I guess I don't really know what to make of it, except to say that, you know, looks aren't everything. And to a certain extent, age and looks are very related, you know.
Sure. Okay. MK, what do you think?
I think men would use any justification to try to sleep with people who are way younger than them. So I've heard that argument too, like, oh, well, it's just for fertile. Really? Is that really it? Like, really, you want to make babies with every woman you want to fuck? Can we be real? Like,
right.
Is that's at the forefront of your brain? Like, you're looking at a woman you want to fuck, being like, I want to put babies in her and raise a family.
Yeah.
Like, can we be real about what people really want? You know, like that is not at the forefront of most of their minds. That's not why most, you know, in these statistics, why most men are attracted to women that age. Like, it's, you know, I think it's what Stephanie said. I mean, you know, you have certain indicators of attraction, youth, and, you know, beauty are more highly correlated. Like, it's, you know, but it's, and some people may make the argument, oh, well, you know, that's why we desire people, because it does go back to reproduction and stuff. And I think that's kind of like a sad way to think of sex.
Well, and it's
Yeah,
leaving the other half of the evolution of sex out of it. And I bring this up all the time,
right.
because evolution is as much a social action, a social lubricant, as it is about procreation. And it co-evolved. Like, the people got to get this word in their head, co-evolution.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Not, you know, a lot of things don't just evolve for one purpose. They evolve with two at the same exact time. And it makes sense why they do that. You know, like, I mean, even if you're that kind of person, it's like, well, what about the behavioral psychology of it? Well, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a lot of sense that it does that. So MK's giving a face right now.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of like the other justification that someone would use saying that. It's like, I just really want to socially get along with this person.
I just want to interact deeply.
Like, yeah, like I just really want this social lubrication to be super smooth.
Yeah.
No, but like, I do agree with that. I do think, you know, that's definitely an aspect too. But I just wish people would be a little more honest about it, and like not always try to tie it back to like, oh, it's just, you know, just about reproduction, because it's obviously not that. Like, that's every person you sleep with is not necessarily who you want to make babies with. You may not want to make babies at all.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. That the whole like baby making thing totally leaves out gay relationships. And
exactly.
Like, I was just
about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, I'm attracted to women. Obviously, if you don't know that by now, you haven't been listening to the show. I'm thinking, I'm 32 years old. So I'm thinking, would I sleep with a 42-year-old woman? Oh, hell yeah. Would I sleep with a 22-year-old woman? Less likely, I think.
Really?
I think that's less likely. Yeah, I think I'm less likely to have much in common with her to get to the point. And why?
I think I would find her more annoying, but maybe that's like a little judgmental. And like, I don't want to like overgeneralize. Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, so. I mean, but then what does that 42-year-old woman think of 32-year-old me? Does she find me annoying? I hope not.
Yeah.
I'm not a college student, right? But so yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. In a way, when I'm 42, am I going to be a cougar? I don't know. But would I sleep with a 20-year-old woman, no, that's too young for me. It's past my personal boundaries.
Well,
but I know a heterosexual couple that has a 15-year age difference.
Mm-hmm.
They started dating when the woman was in her mid-20s, I think.
Okay.
And the guy was nearly like in his late 30s.
Shy of 40, sure.
Right. And they're like one of the best couples I know. But they also, this was not like, oh, you're hot, I want to bang you. This was like, we are great life partners and we're made for each other. And they talked about what's going to happen when I'm 60 and you're 75.
Uh-huh.
And they talked about it extensively. And they actually hesitated to get into a relationship, even though they felt like they were a great match because of the age difference. So I think they had a lot of awareness around it, but that's not the typical norm. Most people do not go into a situation like that with awareness. They're just like, oh, can I get away with this? Yeah, okay, then it's fine. Right?
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, like, I really wonder what motivated this question. Is the person looking for a permission slip? Do they want us to shame certain relationships? I'm not really interested in that. I'm not really interested in giving permission slip either.
Yeah, right.
Like, I just do it.
Even though I agree with your
want.
little rule of like 30s, don't go below 20.
That's a personal rule for me, and
yeah.
I think it's a good rule. Maybe other people would want to adopt it as well, but there might be exceptions to it. I don't know, and obviously not everyone is going to follow my rule, and I don't really care to do anything about that. So, so there you go. But I really wonder like what actually motivated that question.
Sure. Well, I don't know. So
I know. All we can do is
Yeah,
speculate.
I'd really like to know, I guess, more specifics. Like, what did they mean by age difference? Because it is so broad, but maybe they did just want to leave it broad and open-ended and just kind of hear a few different types of, arguments or conversations about different scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I think this is a person that has done a lot of internal work. So,
okay.
Like that's my opinion based upon who it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I do want to kind of flip it on its head a little bit and talk about something that, like, I think, and this is one of those double standards in culture, or at least in our society, in American culture or whatever. When you have the situation, say, where a young man, and I mean like teenager, maybe even 12, 13, 14, something like that, really young, and this has happened, and this is kind of why I want to bring it up, has stooped the teacher. Okay,
like
an older
the
teacher.
Mary Kay Letourneau and
exactly.
What's his name? Billy.
Yeah, and so because a lot of people were cheering for that young guy. I mean, like a lot of guys were really cheering for him, saying, "Good job getting with that teacher."
Yeah,
he was like 13 or 12 when they got together. Though I always thought that was really messed up.
Yeah.
I don't care. And I know it is kind of like laughed about and people make jokes about it. And as far as I know, they're still together and like started a family.
Yeah, they have kids.
They have kids. And I mean, so yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, that's one example of something that maybe, and we don't even know how traumatic it was, really. Mm-hmm. But I'm still totally creeped out by it. I try to apply the same standards, when it comes to age differences for all genders.
Yeah.
I mean, I really think that, like, while there may be some differences in levels of maturity between genders, I still think the power imbalance between a teacher and a student is so great that it gets into unethical territory. And it's just
like that boss employee, like Stephanie was saying. Yeah.
Right. And it's people joke about it. It's like, oh, that guy's so lucky. Like if a high school student is caught sleeping with his older female teacher. And I still think that's messed up. I think it's an exploitation. It's kind of exploitative, and the power dynamics are all messed up. And I mean, just because that kid's, maybe really horny or whatever and wanted to get with that teacher, and, they see, like, consent seemed like it was, given, still doesn't mean it was really okay, and still doesn't mean that, like, maybe, there wasn't trauma happening. And I mean, I think it's pretty messed up either way.
Yeah, well, you hit on what I think is really kind of the answer to that. I mean, and not that this person was asking this question. I'm kind of doubling down on the whole conversation we're having. Mm-hmm. I mean, because a lot of people rightfully said, look, if the genders were reversed in that situation, Like,
I think it would have been perceived differently.
Oh yeah, there would have been a witch hunt. I mean, it would have been. I mean, people coming down the street with their torches and pitchforks, the whole thing, to skewer this male teacher. If the genders were reversed, it would have been a male teacher and it would have been a young gal. I mean, I think and I can kind of understand this. I can remember being a teenager and thinking, like, I had a math teacher. I'll just call her Mrs. D. I won't mention her name. And I was like, wow, she is gorgeous. She is like I totally want something, but looking back on that, when I do, reflection on that.
If she was interested in you, it would have been fucked up.
Well, but reflecting on it, like, I didn't want a relationship.
Yes.
And that's the key point, is that I didn't want a relationship, even if I thought in my young mind, and this speaks to that power dynamic, like that I didn't have the separation of relationship and sex necessarily, which, I mean, there can be a degree of separation there. But that's the key point, is that what we're saying here really solves that whole, I think, enigma, is that, look, the person's not developed. They don't understand, sex and relationships at that point. They don't realize that they're just wanting to kind of get off, or they're, something like, go ahead, MK, what do you got?
Yeah. Well, and it's really sexist to say that, oh, well, it's okay for a male student to have an affair with his teacher because, oh, well, you know how horny teenage boys are. I was a teenager. I was a pretty horny teenager. The horny, teenage girls are just as horny. And I mean, I remember there were certain teachers that I thought were, hot. And I was like, oh man, like hot for teacher. And it would have been inappropriate even then. Because it's inappropriate because of the power dynamics, and it does kind of feed into these ideas about men and women and all this kind of cultural baggage and sexist baggage of like, oh, well, it's okay that things happen to men because they're hornier than women, and that's actually just not true, on any level. It's an assumption that's made that's just has been proven over and over again and not be true.
Sure. Yeah, I want to tell a quick funny story. So I was at a concert. It was a Demi Lovato concert. I'm not going to go into why I was at this concert, okay? But I was taking people to it. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
And I thought it was the weirdest damn thing. She was about to do this at the time. This was probably, I guess now that'd be about 10 years ago. Not, 8, 9, 10 years ago, something like this. So Demi Lovato was a teenager kind of at the time. And she was singing this song. Or she was doing like kind of an opening monologue to this song. And she's saying, have you ever had anybody really break your heart, and like talking about this really traumatic relationship and everything. And I just start looking around and I'm like, what the average age? I mean, it's mostly, girls here, and the average age is probably like 8. And I'm like, what the hell is she saying? That's not to say that young people, I mean, they're little humans and they can experience traumas and heartbreak in all kinds of ways. But I'm like, what exact relationships, who is she talking to when she's saying this sort of thing? It was a very strange. Do you have any thought on that, MK? I mean, what do you think when you hear that kind of story?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of weird. Like, if your audience is that young, but I mean, that's a lot of pop music. It's about love and heartbreak and relationships and stuff that the kids listening to it really have no concept of. I mean, I remember listening to pop music as a kid and whatever boy band was singing about like heartbreak and stuff like that. I remember singing along and liking the music, but really having no concept of what they were even talking about.
Right.
It's just catchy and it sounds cool. And should the content be more relatable to the age group? I don't know. Like, it's. I mean,
granted, what do you sing appealing. About? Like really, what do you what do you sing about? Like, well, my Tonka truck broke or something.
Ate my homework, and this fucking school sucks. It's a prison.
Well, and kids like to imagine that they're older, and I think that's a part of the appeal of like listening to certain types of pop music and stuff too. I mean, they're singing along. I mean, like growing up, I grew up on like blues and rock and roll and stuff, and I remember like singing along to the Lemon song as a kid, like Led Zeppelin, and having no concept what that was about until I got much older. I just liked the way it sounded. And it took me out of my own head and experience as like a kid, and I don't know, like maybe that sounds like a really bad example. Saying that. Oh my God. But like it takes you out, like, or like listening to like Britney Spears. Like when I was growing up, Britney Spears was a big thing. So you would listen to these love songs, and I would imagine going through that, like going through breaking up with the love of my life, or a future partner or something like that. And I don't know, it's just part of the appeal of music is like you're using your imagination and kind of going into a different world. And like when you read a book too, like you're imagining that you're this character in a story maybe.
Right.
And so I mean,
well, I think that I was going to say, I think that adds to the confusion of like, when you don't have the actual experience, that guess what? This isn't how every relationship goes. You base all your,
what else do you have to go on?
Yeah. And I wonder if that causes a lot of problems and is something worth thinking about if you're an older person and you're looking at younger, going with younger people.
Yeah. I think my parents were concerned about that when I was young, like 10, 11, 12, like kind of going through puberty age. Like they were really concerned about the music I listened to. And maybe that was one reason why. They just didn't want me to, I don't know.
I'll tell you what's creepy.
Adult.
There weren't good messages in like a lot
no,
of
of course not.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand what it meant. Like, I don't know.
Well, right. Like
I would listen to rap music and I didn't know what they were talking about really.
Cyndi Lauper's She Bop. Like that's all about masturbating.
Yeah.
But like I know, I've seen like I know there were girls, 6, 8, 9 years old. I don't know, whatever.
No idea what
and they're just singing this stuff. Or like those creepy. We were talking about this the other day, Stephanie. There's these creepy. I don't know if do you remember Kids Bop? These CDs that were for sale.
Yeah.
Creepy as fuck.
They are creepy.
Because it's these little kids singing these songs, and like they'll be singing Nickelback. No comment on that, please. They'll be singing like all kinds of like these really deep, like heartfelt or like heartbreak songs or stuff that's like really very adult, like super adult content.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that just comes off as so fucking strange. I don't dig it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the cartoons and movies that we watched as a kid too, like,
oh God,
there was like so much violence in there that you don't even notice, and like just fucked up shit.
Like, what was Ren and Stimpy? Like, I love Ren and Stimpy, but like, not appropriate.
So I think moral of the story, you gotta let young people figure out how reality actually works, because if it's going to be all based on like words that they hear you saying to them, and that comes from some kind of song or who knows what, I don't know.
Well, maybe there isn't as much discussion around that. Like, maybe I think in a lot of ways, like maybe parents don't want to talk to their kids about these subjects because it's kind of uncomfortable and like whatever, but you have to do it anyway. Okay. Like that's. And I don't know how serious kids take the messages that they're getting from pop music. 'Cause like I also don't want to be like, oh well, I listened to like a lot of punk as a teenager, and I mean like as much as like I sang about like throwing bricks through Starbucks windows, like I wasn't gonna actually do it.
Oh, come on. You were gonna do it.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of want to do it. But
I love that song too. Baby, I'm an anarchist.
Yeah. I love that song.
I love that song too, but I wouldn't do that either. In fact, there was actually a time in my life when I was listening to that song and I was like, that's so like red and black. Like they don't respect property rights. That's the difference between me and them. Like
the difference between them and real anarchists,
right? In caps. So anyway, yeah.
Did you have a last point you want to make?
One last point on
please.
the age thing,
please.
And then we can move on.
Yes.
I know somebody it's a woman in her late 30s, and she dates on OkCupid and other online dating apps in a major city. And I see her post sometimes on Facebook about like her experiences with OkCupid. She'll post like shitty messages that she gets and like ridiculous like fuck ups that she receives, usually always from men. And she is an Asian woman, so she gets a lot of men who like fetishize her she and stuff. And she gets these messages from like early 20s guys, and she said she basically is open about the fact that she's tried fucking some of them And she's in her late 30s. She's probably pushing 40. So she's tried getting with some 23-year-old guys. And she says they are just the worst at sex. They're just all like frat boys that just don't know how to please a woman, but think they do. And it always makes me wonder, like, what is so great about having sex? Like, people say they want to have sex with virgins. Oh, you want to have sex with someone who's sexually inexperienced and has no clue what the fuck they're doing? What's the appeal
Look
there?
on MK's face.
Right? Like, okay, you want them to remember you for the rest of your life. Is that really just narcissism, right? Like, you want to be there first so they always remember you? Okay, that's kind of weird. I mean, it just doesn't, like, a virgin is not good at sex. And also people who are sexually inexperienced are generally not good at sex. And people who have less life experience in general, because they're younger, also tend to be not as experienced at sex and probably not as good at it. And so, yeah, that's another thing about age differences in relationships that makes me a little bit wary.
Sure.
And it's also why I don't think I would, at this point, I'm 32. I don't think I would really go much more than 5 years younger.
Okay.
Because nothing in common and also just mismatch.
All right. Well, I have a point I want to bring up about that. MK, do you have any thoughts on all that? No? Okay. So there is a theory out there that people who had sex before the internet was a thing. Generally, this is a theory towards guys. Fuck differently than ones that, you know, had the internet as they grew up, like that. That is somehow, especially with guys, is somehow a real problem
because
like
of porn.
Expectations of like body hair stuff and things,
all
like
kinds
that,
of shit,
or,
and porn,
right?
How they even stoop, you know, all of that, like that. It's, I mean, what do you think about that theory?
So I was on the cusp of the internet generation.
Right.
I started having the internet when I was maybe 13 or 14.
Okay.
And yeah, I did see some internet porn when I was that age. It was probably too early for me to see it. I also got a great sex education on the internet because I looked up questions that I was curious about, and I found age-appropriate and also pleasure-focused education about sex. And I learned how to masturbate because I looked it up on the internet. I had no clue. I tried rubbing myself. It didn't work, you know?
Yeah. Because the argument is that they're inferior. Like that if you were one of the ones that started having sex after the internet became a thing, that you're inferior at sex. So, okay. So that's a great counterpoint that you're bringing up.
Yeah. So, but I was at the very early edge of the internet before it was like all porn. Like there were actually text-based websites that you could go and read about sexuality.
Yeah.
Like I think there used to be this website called like sexuality.org or something, and I would read some articles on there, and it was very helpful because I definitely didn't get any pleasure-focused sex ed in school that said it's okay to masturbate,
no way.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and I was curious about it. So, and I couldn't, there were no books in my house that I could read. So I went to the internet and that really helped. So I'm glad I had that. I feel like there is some truth to that if you grew up watching internet porn and that was your earliest concept of sex, and you just saw the videos with no explanation that, hey, this is fantasy and these are things that are kind of on the extreme end. This is not like beginner level sex. This is like varsity level sex that you're watching. Like, if you just saw that with no explanation or background or context, I think it would skew your ideas about sex. It would definitely affect your ideas about sex in a way that I personally wouldn't like in a partner. So there is maybe some truth to that, maybe a lot of truth to it. However, I don't want to fall into the trap of saying like, it almost sounds like a variation of kids these days. You know?
Right.
Kids these days, they're all having sex in fucked up ways, right?
Yeah.
Every older generation has been saying that about every group of, quote, kids these days since the beginning of time. So, you know, technology and life changes, deal with it. Younger people the younger generations might have different attitudes about sex than you. But that's a good reason to kind of aim for your age range if you want a partner who's compatible and that you don't have to wrangle with these issues over.
Sure. MK, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it can be, maybe a little bit of a mixed bag because, I mean, I found out about sex, a lot from the internet, just like doing internet searches and just, being generally curious and stuff like that. But I think I did avoid a lot of the kind of expectations that are placed on you. And I have heard other people complain about that, mostly women complaining about like, oh, well, men expect you to be like waxed and look like a porn star and stuff like that.
And want to like do anal on the first time.
Yeah, and like, maybe be more like, sexually adventurous than you may want to be. And so I have heard that it's kind of a problem. I just don't tolerate that behavior, I guess. Like, I don't give a shit.
Good for you.
I'm just like,
okay,
don't put up with that shit.
Like, I don't, obviously, I mean, it's okay to have preferences for things, but yeah, like submitting to any kind of pressure, anything that makes you uncomfortable is definitely not cool. But I also think, at least what I've been kind of seeing in younger generations, like I've seen like some YouTube series about this, I think the issue of consent is being more talked about. And I think that's a really good thing that the internet has brought up.
Sure.
You're seeing this being discussed more on college campuses and in the general population even. And I think, it's such an important, it's like one of the most important discussions you can have. So I think it's made that conversation more accessible to more people, because that's also something, I mean, you kind of get that discussion in sex ed, but I think that now people are becoming more comfortable with talking about it, and there's notions like enthusiastic consent, which I think, is a much better way of consenting to something than just being like no means no, or like, it's better at maneuvering kind of gray areas with consent too. Like, if someone's not saying like fuck yes, then like maybe you should be a little hesitant at getting with them or whatever. So I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, I think there are maybe some bad things that came out of, maybe people watching too much porn or something and having like these weird expectations for what their partner should be and what kind of acts they should be doing immediately. But I also think there's a lot of educational tools that older generations didn't have, or maybe didn't even care to have those discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, and this leads in nicely to our next question, and we've already been going for like an hour, so this is a long one, but we'll try and like make the next couple things brief, I guess, depending on, how you all are feeling. But yeah, I mean, I think you really got to destigmatize like sex in general, because the only thing that, like, if the concern is that porn is creating unrealistic expectations, or it's creating unhealthy attitudes of what sex should even look like or be like and all of this, the only way to combat that is to put the right stuff, quote unquote, on the internet, like, I mean, like that's,
you can create better porn, and better porn is being made.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
I mean, there's some great stuff out there. The featuring a wide range of bodies and, sexuality types and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, that's the real like solution if this is actually a problem. What this theory that I described, in my opinion, that's, and I agree, like the consent thing is fantastic. That's actually a conversation finally. 'Cause I know in the 90s, I'd like that word didn't even come up for anything. So anyway, is that it on that?
Yeah.
I feel like we covered it.
Yeah,
well.
I think we did.
Yeah, we deep dove.
Very thorough.
All right. We like to be thorough here on Sovereign Tech. Okay. So let's shake it up a little bit. And so here's the question that actually came in a tweet. I understand why devoutly religious people are offended by nudity, but why do you think so many non-religious people are offended by nudism? So nudism, I mean, the word nudism was used particularly.
Nudity and nudism are different.
I filled in the word nudity, so like to understand what was being said. But nudism, of course, is this lifestyle that you generally don't wear clothes. And as far as in the United States, the only place this is actually legal to do across the board is in Vermont, where you are legally allowed to walk around naked at all times, anytime that you want.
I thought it was just one town in Vermont.
I think it's
city.
the whole state.
Okay. There's definitely nudist places in
Vermont.
Florida, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's a lot of nudist places in Florida.
Like resorts, right?
Yeah,
it's private property.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Okay, so
Vermont, I feel like that's kind of a cheat because it's like,
well, this thing, who
6
uses
months
it?
out of the year? Like,
Yeah, but who does it? Like nobody, even though Vermont, it's legal there.
maybe
Nobody.
like in August, but
I was about to say, like, Vermont's a weird state to have that.
Yeah.
they probably don't even need to make it a law because it's like, why is not a problem,
Yeah,
right?
like, was that a joke?
Yeah.
They just passed that as a joke. It's like, yeah, you guys could be naked. Good luck.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
So, all right. Well, I mean, MK, I'd love to start with you, on this. I mean, so you understand what, like, nudism is. And,
right, yeah.
Like, what? Yeah, I mean, why are people so offended? Maybe some of what we've talked about through the rest of this episode, speaks to it. Why are people so offended by the concept of people just walking around naked, at all times?
Well, there are people who are devoutly religious who are offended by it, but the larger culture dictates that it's unacceptable unless it's used to sell cheeseburgers or some shit. So,
right, Carl's Jr.
Carl's Jr. So, no, but there is an argument to be made that while not everyone is devoutly religious, we still live in a predominantly Christian country, and you get these social signals and cultural signals throughout your whole life, even if you're not religious. Like, I wasn't raised religious, but I grew up in a very religious town. All my friends were Christian.
Well, Richard Dawkins, the guy, one of the prime atheists in the world, he says he's a cultural Christian. Like, I mean, even though he's not, he doesn't buy into Christianity, he still considers and proudly considers himself a cultural Christian. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, so this religion is still deeply embedded in all of our cultural institutions, in all aspects. So you can't really separate it, even if more people are becoming agnostic or they're not practicing Christians or whatever. And atheists are a very tiny, tiny percentage of the population. So I agree that, to say that, like, oh, well, you can't have naked bodies out there is a weird, like, you're sexualizing something that isn't inherently sexual.
Right.
Because it's just bodies. It's just, flesh on bones. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I don't.
Skin.
Yeah. Like, I don't immediately find it sexual if someone's walking around naked. And I would like to see that mindset more widely accepted, but it's just not going to be because there's so much religion embedded in the cultural institutions and the laws and stuff like that prohibiting that. I mean, it's still a very puritanical mindset about nudity, and it's a weirdly, there's so much weird repressed sexuality stuff that comes with that too,
which I don't see going away anytime soon.
Which I really don't see it going away. For a very, very long time. So that would be my answer. I think it's, it's not that, like, a bunch of people are devoutly religious. It's just that, like, you can't separate that religion from everything else in society.
I agree completely. Stephanie, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the exact same thing about the way that Judeo-Christian mores sort of like seep into culture. Not really even Judeo, just Christian mores like seep into culture, and you can't avoid them even if you're supposedly. I grew up in New England, which is supposedly the most atheist, liberal Massachusetts, coast, East Coast, and I got so many Christian ideas. I was raised Jewish, but I got Christian ideas about sex, about clothing, about life, about everything. And I absorb them from culture. So yeah, that's absolutely true. The other thing, I think, just you kind of alluded to this, MK, or hinted at it, but I think that some people, and this is also a religious idea, you see it especially in Islam, I think that some people have a fear that men just cannot control their sexual urges. And so we have to, as a society, we have to put clothing on the women to kind of compensate for that, to manage the men's inability to control themselves sexually. Otherwise, they'll just start raping people. And we see it in the idea of, like, she was asking for it because she wore provocative clothing, what people say about rape cases, where they look at what the woman was wearing as though that matters in the case. And even if that is such a prevalent rape myth that if you ask people like, okay, If a woman is walking down the street naked or topless and she gets raped, was she asking for it? Some people will be like, yeah, she was kind of asking for it.
Like a large majority of people.
Most people will say that.
Yeah.
Even people who consider themselves very progressive, and they're like, oh, well, of course, if she was wearing a short dress or skirt, then she wasn't asking for it. But if she's walking down the street naked or topless, yeah, they're like, yeah, that one I have trouble with. Maybe she was kind of asking for it. And no, even if someone is naked on the street, does not mean that they deserve to be raped. No, like it's on the rapist to not rape. It's not on the person to not get raped. So there's that weird idea. And like, obviously we see an extreme example of this with burqa, in Saudi Arabia, or some regions of Saudi Arabia, I guess, where, women are like legally required to cover up everything except their eyes, but also just in the idea in Islam and also in Judaism. This is in Orthodox Judaism as well, where women's hair is considered so seductive that it should not be shown to other men besides their husband, because if a man sees a woman's hair, he'll just go nuts, and who knows what might happen.
Well, I don't want to nitpick that, but there's a lot more to that little rule than like that has to do with literally like angels. Like demonic angels and other things, like seeing.
Oh, the angels might get aroused.
It has to do with Genesis chapter 6, verse 4.
It's like the head covering thing too.
Yep, saying it all comes from this one little verse in the book of Genesis.
Yeah. But if you ask, like in Islam, right? Like a lot of American women who are Muslim wear hijabs, right, or cover their head. And if you ask them why they do that, they'll say it's about modesty. Mm-hmm. And that's the same exact thing that Christians say about why they won't wear sleeveless shirts or spaghetti strap tank tops. It's about modesty. You want to be modest, right? And modesty is a virtue. So like that is when basically a woman or whoever internalizes that idea that somehow you're responsible for other people looking at you and getting turned on, right? When you're just trying to dress in a comfortable way for the heat or whatever. So yeah, those are religious ideas, I think, that factor into the whole nudity thing. Another one is control, because if you can force people to dress a certain way or to dress at all, that's a way of controlling them. And so I think a lot of nudists or naturists are maybe like fighting back against that. Like, yeah, it seems kind of ridiculous, like when a kid runs around the house naked because he's like throwing off his diaper and he just doesn't want to. You can't control me. But I mean, it is kind of a thing, like school uniforms, right? That's a mechanism of control. Any job or anything, any institution that makes you wear a uniform, when you put on that suit, you start acting a certain way and you start believing that you belong to this collective and you're playing by certain rules. Mm-hmm. And so when you put on any suit of clothes, because society expects it or pressures you to, you are being kind of controlled in a certain sense, especially female sexuality. Because if we have to, we have to cover up our breasts. Men don't, they can be basically shirtless in a lot of, in like beaches and stuff like that in some situations, right? But in situations where you would wear a bathing suit, and it used to be that women would have to wear these full bathing suits that looked like wrestling uniforms or something, came down to their knees and had little shorts attached, because it was considered indecent and, but those standards have changed over time. Now we can wear bikinis. Bikinis were scandalous in the 1950s and 60s.
Super scandalous.
Yeah. But now they're no big deal. Now you go to a beach and it's like, okay, everybody wears a bikini. Even the people who don't have societally perfect quote unquote bodies, right, are wearing bikinis. And it's like no big deal. So, what's next? Maybe it'll continue to go into that direction. But there's a lot of pushback, I think, from people who maybe have that idea that it's impossible to control their sexual urges, or it's impossible to stop them from sexualizing other people, so we must control what the other people wear. It's a very controlling kind of attitude. And so what else is new? Like, attempts to control female sexuality have been done for a very long time in a patriarchal society.
Ooh, there's the P word.
The P word, yeah.
Oh, shit.
We already said it at the beginning. The seal has been broken.
Do you have any other thoughts on that, MK? I mean,
yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good point about it being a lot about control. And yeah, I mean, bodies have been unjustly sexualized, and not because they're inherently sexual or certain, you know, body parts are inherently sexual. It's just that's something that's been placed onto people by other people, by people with weird ideas, you know, of their own. So yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, guy on Twitter, like, or person on Twitter, I should say, I just don't really see it changing, and that's unfortunate. Because I would like to see bodies maybe desexualized. I'm not saying there's no place for, you know, sexiness or anything like that, but I mean, like the topless thing, for example, people push back so hard against ordinances
as though society is gonna fall apart if women can show their boobs, even if it's like, breastfeeding.
Boobs are not like sexual organs
necessarily,
you know? Necessarily.
Right. And I like how you said that, like, not necessarily sexual or not inherently sexual. Nakedness is not inherently sexual, because I really like it, and I think that's important to put that word inherently in there, because they can be sexual in some contexts, right? But they're not automatically and always sexual.
Yeah,
right?
Like walking, like, say, you know, if nudity was more accepted in society, like someone walking around the grocery store naked, I mean, like, they're not, you know, the context matters, like, they're not there for sexy times necessarily,
right?
I mean, you know, and that that shouldn't be assumed that they are just because they're naked.
Now I see, like, the reason I said that is because I see a lot of people nowadays who are pushing back against bodies just being automatically sexualized, and they'll say, well, breasts aren't sexual, or nipples aren't sexual, or what genitalia aren't sexual. And it's like, well, wait a minute, they're not sexual. They're just not always sexual, right? You don't have to see them and have a boner or get aroused or turned on just because you see some breasts or whatever.
I do always think it's so weird that like, you're not allowed to go topless, even though a breast is just a nipple with some fat behind it, you know, like, there's nothing, it's just a little, you know, well, I mean, it's a little different. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. It's such a bizarre thing for people to flip out about.
Yeah, and that speaks back to that coevolution. I mean, these things, like you say, aren't just sexual, you know, like, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different reasonings behind it. I mean, now I've read from feminist writers that, you know, they are against nudism, and feminism is, for those that don't know, is such a broad, like, I mean, there's so many different versions of feminism. There's so many different ideologies within feminism. It's really not one thing. And honestly, if somebody is like against feminism and like they just keep saying that over and over again,
they obviously don't know what it is.
I list off like 10 different kinds of feminism to ask which specific one they're against.
Right. I mean, credit to some people. I have seen some people start to say, like, specifically, well, I'm against third wave feminism. I'm like, okay, whatever, you know, but at least you've done
third wave feminism.
You're right.
A lot to unpack there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's still a great point. So, but what they will say is that, you know, it's offensive if guys are just suddenly all walking around with boners. Now, I mean, you know, because they're seeing, you know, naked people, say suddenly everybody starts walking around as nudists. Now, I mean, the answer to that, of course, is very simple. Is that, well, once you, like, get rid of the mystique that clothing brings on to the human body and the sexuality that it kind of brings on, they're not going to walk around with boners anymore. So, I mean, even if the whole world did suddenly become nudist, there's definitely going to be a transition time. Let's say that happened. And I'm not saying I need the whole world to be nudist or something like that, but yeah, I mean, I understand these concerns, but there's very simple answers for them. And it just goes to show how much all of this is just cultural construct. And so,
and if they're seeing a bunch of other guys with boners and they're not gay or bisexual, then wouldn't that balance things out, right?
Yeah.
When they start losing
that boner's going to drop once they see other ones.
A bunch of other boners.
Right.
Yeah, good point. So, all right. Well, do we have any other major thoughts on this? Otherwise, I have one more question as far as it goes.
Yeah, there was something else I was thinking about, but I can't exactly remember it now.
Okay. Well, we'll let you keep chewing on that.
Okay.
So I'll ask you, MK. I mean, like, all right. Well, actually, you know what? Hold on. So here's one of the worst things that happens. This seemingly has nothing to do with Christianity and all that. But, like, you know, I I dig it. I get the idea. Like, I like to make kind of incendiary posts and social media things and whatever, or comments on Sovereign Tech, about, I think people should be totally free to not wear clothes and all of this stuff. Instantaneously, the first response I get every single time is, but it gets cold. And it's like, yeah, so what? No shit. So I'm going to put on a jacket just like I do now. Like it is, it's amazing. Like, and I don't know what creates that response. I don't think it's practicality, because you just look at these people and like, you're not a very practical human being. So I don't know where that comes from, but I mean, it is so deep, this idea of like, no, nudity is bad. I mean, biblically, like it's directly correlated with sin. You are wearing clothing because of sin. Like, right. I mean, like nudity is automatically considered bad. And like you said, MK, I mean, like this, these mores, these, religious concepts aren't going away anytime soon. So, but I mean,
just to provide a counter example to that, Brian,
sure.
We like to watch this reality TV show called
Naked
and Afraid. And it's a show about two strangers, a man and a woman, get dropped off in a remote location, usually in some kind of tropical climate, but the climate varies. It can be on islands, it can be in the mountains, in a jungle, in the desert, all different places. There's even one in Canada, which is pretty nuts if you think about it. But anyway, they get dropped off and they've got nothing, no food, no water, one survival item, which is usually a knife or a fire starter or a net, and they're naked, no clothes. And that's why it's called Naked and Afraid. And they have to, the only objective of the game is it's not much of a game. You basically just have to survive in the remote location for 3 weeks and then make it to the point where you're going to get picked up at the end of 3 weeks.
Sure.
And hopefully both partners are there and make it all the way through. So, it's really interesting to see that, because some of the locations, it's very hot and you're like, oh, good. It would be easy to be naked there, right? Like,
right.
They get dropped off like somewhere in Africa, right? And it's very hot, or like just somewhere that's close to the equator. Like, I don't know, what's close to like Colombia or something.
Sure.
And they're, you would think it's a tropical climate. It's going to be hot there. So it would be great to be naked. But actually, the first thing they discover is like, okay, the sun is beating down on my back. I'm getting a bad sunburn. My feet are killing me because there's thorns on the ground. I need shoes. I think there are practical reasons to wear clothing when you think about it that way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's I forget what the complete list is, but like the first 5 human inventions, one of them was boots. I mean, for very good reason, and I totally agree with that. So yeah, your point is definitely well taken. The skin thing, I mean, I think if people naturally grew up, in those conditions and everything, like their skin would be able to handle it without having to wear clothing. I mean, it's when you're dropping, pasty white people, and I mean that with all respect, seriously, into Africa.
I mean, even indigenous people wear hats a lot.
Yep. Hats are another great thing. Sure.
So.
Yeah, no, there's a point to it. You're right. I your point is taken.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, but that gives great context to the very last bit of this, which is, like, MK, how do you feel about nudism? Like, I mean, are you looking forward to a world, or like, would you like the option to be able to just walk around anywhere, go to the store naked, things like this?
I would if certain other things weren't a thing, I guess. I think that I'm totally fine with people being nude. Like, I don't have any problem with it if people want to walk around naked or whatever, because I'm not immediately thinking, of them in a sexual way,
right?
Because they're naked.
Right.
But I don't know that we've gotten even close to that point with most people.
Yeah.
But it is kind of interesting. I mean, like, because you mentioned the clothing, clothing was obviously something that was created to protect us from the environment. Well, now we have like air conditioning and stuff. So like, why can't we be naked inside?
Yeah.
Like that. I'm totally cool with that. Like, that
right.
makes sense to me. I mean, I'm naked in my house all the time. Like, that's just kind of, when I'm not around anyone or whatever, like, that's just kind of my default. Cause it's just comfortable.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think it would be cool to see that. I would like to see nudity less sexualized, and there being not this element of shame attached to it, because that's really a lot of it too, is like there's all this shame around the naked human form, and it's completely unnecessary and comes from these totally outdated, most of the time religious practices. So yeah, I mean, it would be cool, but yeah, I would also hope that other things lined up on that same timeline of, okay, everything, it's okay to be nude, but hey, maybe we don't have as much sexism and stuff like that.
Yeah, there'd have to be a cultural shift.
There'd have to be lots of cultural shifts.
Yeah, sure.
In many directions.
Absolutely.
For things to line up right to where, I would be comfortable with it.
Sure. Stephanie?
I completely agree. I would be interested in being, going to the beach topless or whatever, or just going hiking topless or something like that, maybe with a hat to keep the sun and the ticks off. But just taking off clothes or showing my boobs, whatever. If not for the fact that I'd be pretty certain I would get harassed and I don't want the attention and I just don't want to deal with it. So I cover up. And that's when I think about it that way, there is a part of me that's like, well, fuck that. I don't want to, but I also don't want to be the first one. I don't want to start the nudist revolution, maybe in an environment like if I was in, let's say, a coven of witches and we were doing a sky-clad spell, I would totally go sky-clad with everybody else, or maybe like a ceremonial robe or something. If I was hanging out with friends who I knew genuinely had no problem with it, like in the hot tub, let's just say, and their bathing suit's optional, yeah, sure, no problem. Those are fun situations to be nude. And actually, I think the thing I was going to say before was my perspective on nudity changed when I went to medical school, because it's just when you learn anatomy, you realize that it's just a body and we all have the same types of, most of the same parts,
Right.
And there's all different kinds of bodies and everyone is naked under their clothes and it's just not a big deal, And so I think that was actually helpful for me in letting go of some shame that I had. Sure. About it. But yeah, like you said, MK, I don't want to be the first one to start the nudist revolution. I'm still seeing those consequences right now and just don't want to deal with it.
Blaze that trail and I support them. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah. I think it does take a certain type of person who really does not give a fuck or is very passionate about nudism. That's the only women who are willing to go topless now are like activists, there's not many women that are willing to do that.
We get harassed enough when we wear clothes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, and that level of harassment just seems to increase the fewer clothes you wear, unfortunately. I mean.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really a catch-22. I don't have any fear whatsoever of walking around that way. And, certainly, and as a man, as a man, I don't have to deal with a lot of the more shaming aspects that would come, along with, say if you two did such a thing. But at the same time, I'm in a catch-22 where kind of like that feminist argument that I described earlier about, they even seeing a penis or something might be kind of offensive or something like that. Well, in one sense, I want to be like, yeah, screw you. I don't care. At the other time, it's
don't look.
Yeah, we're
that's what the other argument is, right? If you're offended by boobs, don't look at boobs.
Well, right. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I get it. The culture's not here yet. I want to be respectful, and I don't want to I don't want to freak anybody out or anything. So yeah, it's tough that, and that's what makes it so hard to even ever get to a point where this would be somehow where nudism would be normalized in any way, is because you have so many different factors, like MK was saying.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, just kind of like a follow up to that feminist argument. It comes from just the fact that certain things have been kind of weaponized against certain people.
Sure.
And that's why they don't want to see it.
Sure.
It is going to be disturbing for some people to see a penis sometimes, because they've been traumatized by it or whatever.
Exactly. There's so much sexual trauma in the world, not just in America, in the world that, and me personally, no pun intended, or pun intended. I don't want to be a dick. Like, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be a jerk. And like, you know, I mean, how far does that go? Yeah, I get that, but really, like, that it doesn't interest me to be, you know, triggering people, quite frankly. Somebody said trigger. Oh no.
I think there are things that people could get offended about other people's bodies that would be totally clothed. Like, for example, I have like D to double D size breasts, and the other day we were about to go out somewhere public, like, I don't know if it was a grocery store or a restaurant or something like that. I think it was a restaurant. And I was like, oh, I should probably put on a bra. Because usually I don't wear a bra at home.
Yeah.
And like, it's uncomfortable. And like, as soon as we got back in the door, I'm like, okay, I'm taking it off, you know?
Yeah.
But I felt like I should wear one in public because I'm like, oh, what if my nipples are sticking out or something? Or what if like they're jiggling around and people get offended? Like, but it was almost an afterthought. So I don't know. I'm not blazing the trail, but I feel like people always have judgments about other people's bodies, you know, no matter what. And I'm sure that there are things that people could get offended about even when everybody's fully clothed.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true.
They do now, yeah.
Yeah, so to a certain extent, you just have to say, like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Choose your threshold, pick your battles. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right. So while we're talking about offending people, MK, I would like you to offend a whole lot of people. I mean, you do this all the time anyway, and I always enjoy it. But I usually do on a Q&A, so we'll wrap this up. On a Q&A, I do a pick of the week, an album of the week, okay? And usually it ends up just being a band that I would choose, you know. And a lot of people love this. They love the picks that I get out there. And so MK's very excited right now. So I'm going to, in fact, when I had Stephanie on a Q&A, like you didn't even come up with one. It was Woody's Produce.
Yeah.
Right. Your pick was Biggie, and it was Woody's Produce, the remix. Yeah. Okay. So you did pick one. So MK, here's your chance. What music do you want these listeners to check out?
Okay. I think I'm sorry. I think y'all should check out Andrew Jackson Jihad. They also...
I love the name.
I know. I love the name. They actually recently changed their name to go by AJJ.
They're going mainstream.
Yeah, they've sold out, man. Yeah. But they're a really good folk punk band.
Folk punk. Okay.
So yeah, like so folk punk would be like if you like the acoustic versions of Against Me's songs. It's like that, but with more nihilism and like kind of darker content. So one of the albums is People Who Eat People Are the Luckiest People in the World. That's one of them. I want to name a couple other ones because I also just love the names.
Is that their top album though?
It's hard to say what their top one is.
All right.
They're all really good.
What's the best song? Could you give me a best song, maybe?
The best? Oh, dude.
All right. Well, how about off that album? I don't know.
Okay. Oh man, that's
all right.
Good ones.
All right, keep going.
Keep going.
They'll have to check it out.
So another one is Candy, Cigarettes, Cap Guns, Issue Problems, and Such.
That's a whole album name. Okay.
So some of the songs, like People is a really good song. It's a really good kind of catchy tune.
All right.
Brave is a noun. Probably one of their really sad ones that deals with some dark content is Backpack. It grew on me. I didn't like it when I first heard the song. I was like, man, this is real messed up, dude. But it grew on me, and it's really good. But yeah, they talk about, I mean, it's kind of sad, like, but like edgy sort of material to like catchy acoustic music.
Folk punk. So the folk part of punk means that it is acoustic.
I mean, they have electric songs. I mean, they use a wide range of instruments. But yeah, it's in the kind of folk tradition. So kind of like folk music, but faster. And like,
I have not listened to this yet, listeners, in case you're wondering. But I'm going to be checking this out.
It's some weird stuff, but if your listeners are into weird kind of obscure stuff.
They love the obscure.
Not that obscure. They're not that obscure, but
now that they're AJJ. Yeah.
Yeah, but now that they're AJJ. But they got some really good stuff, and they cover some interesting topics, and yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So
it's so hard to pick like an album too, because I listen to such a wide range. Like I always wanted to like suggest like, like a Jamtronica album too.
Whoa.
Or like just I don't know. There's just so many things to pick, but All
right, so Andrew Jackson Jihad.
Yes. And
the particular album that you mentioned, I'll put it in the show notes. But what was it called again?
People who eat people are the luckiest people.
It's funny. Like 2 months ago, I did a whole show on cannibalism.
Yeah.
So there you go. By request of the users. And so, well, anyway, there we go. Nice.
One of the song titles, the Michael Jordan of drunk driving, is on one of the albums.
Wow.
Oh, shit.
So just to give you an idea of what topics they kind of cover.
Yeah.
It's real messed up.
All right. So there it is. Andrew Jackson Jihad. And there is, boy, we did like an hour and a half. Unbelievable. People are getting some great content. Actually, an hour and 40. So anyway, there's some high fives going around. MK, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll high five. Thank you so much for being on. And
you and me.
Yeah, there you go. Love that. Absolutely. Oh, they just heard that. I don't think I've ever said that on air.
The bat's out of the bag.
Yeah. Oh, shit. So anyway, it's late at night.
I have to pee.
Okay, you have to pee. Nice.
Bye. Thanks for having me on.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you. Woo. All right, MK was great as usual.
Awesome.
We got to have you on a lot more stuff. We'll figure out how we can make all that happen. So, all right, cool. All right, listeners. Of course, no new Sex and Science Hour this week. We'll be back in like 3 weeks or something like that. I don't know. That's not exactly my. It's not in my pay grade. And but there will be a new Sovereign Tech out this week, and there might be some other Patreon content that I'll get out there. There's some stuff that I promised that I want to make sure gets released. So. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.